Hello, I'm David Icke, and today I'm going to ask two big questions. Who are we? What is this I? And where are we? What is this place, this reality that we daily experience? These big questions are so rarely asked when you think they would be at the forefront of what everyone would want to know. And part of the answer to that is that we take it for granted that what we're told about reality is true. So what are we told? Basically, we're led to believe that we live in a solid world, a physical world, a material world, and everything has space between it. There is such a thing as time that moves from past through present to future, and that the interaction of this materiality is random, just happens. There's no force behind it. There's no unity behind it. So we are told that everything's apart from everything else. We are basically cosmic accidents who come out of nowhere and then die at the end of it, and it's all a mess and totally unexplainable. But there is another way of looking at it, which puts everything into a completely different light. What if, and it's more than a what if, this reality wasn't solid, wasn't physical at all? We just experience it like that because it's an illusion. The question that comes from that is, okay then, why am I sitting in this chair? Why aren't I falling through it if there is no solidity? Well, you could say, why, when you're watching a video game or one of these virtual reality games, even more appropriate, the people sitting in the chairs in the virtual reality game don't fall through them either. The resistance that allows me to sit in this chair is not physical resistance, it's electromagnetic resistance. And when you have a resistance within the same band of frequency, we experience that, for reasons I'll come to, as physical resistance. But when people have experiences of what we call ghosts, and they see figures, ethereal figures, floating through walls, people say, that's impossible, you can't go through a wall. Well, you can if you're not on its frequency and thus not subject to its electromagnetic resistance that we experience as apparent physical resistance. This reality is not physical. It's like a virtual reality game. Think of Wi-Fi. You have Wi-Fi fields of information. What are they? They're fields of radiation carrying information. And the computer then connects with that radiation field of Wi-Fi and takes information from it and puts it on the screen in a totally different form to how that information is expressed in the Wi-Fi field. What the computer has done is decode that information into a different form. That's how we experience it. You know, you say to people, what is the internet? And they'll say, oh, well, it's graphics and colors and movies and videos on a computer screen. Well, yes, it is. But only on the screen. That's the only place the internet looks like that. Everywhere else, it is Wi-Fi fields electrical communication systems, codes, and so on. And what we are doing through what I call the biological computer, the body, is to decode information from what I call the cosmic Wi-Fi field into a totally different form on our screen, which is in here. I'll explain this more in a moment, how that process works. But let's put to bed, first of all, the idea that we live in a solid world. We don't. Well, we must live in a solid world because it's made of atoms. Oh, really? So atoms must be solid then? Oh, yeah. Well, here's a quote about atoms. Now, atoms, of course, are a nucleus with electrons flying around them. Okay, here's a quote. If the nucleus were the size of a peanut, the atom would be about the size of a baseball stadium. If we lost all the dead space inside our atoms, we would each be able to fit into a particle of dust, and the entire human race would fit into the volume of a sugar cube. The world ain't solid, but we decode it to appear so. So we experience it that way. Now, the whole base form of this reality is waveform information. Think of it as, like I say, Wi-Fi. And we are decoding that into this reality that we think is outside of us, but actually is in here. So mainstream science has this perception of what it calls the observer effect. What it says is that there is a waveform field of information, which is the base form of this reality, and that only when we look at it, as they say, observe it, does that waveform state become what we call the physical state. And when we're not looking at it, it's back in its waveform state. It's like Wi-Fi again. When a computer is not decoding it into the form you see on the screen, then it's in its Wi-Fi state. I say that when they call it the observer effect, they've got the word wrong. I would call it the decoder effect. The act of observation triggers the process through which we decode the waveform information into physical reality, actually holographic reality, illusory physical. So how does this work? Well, just look at the five senses. The five senses take waveform information, they turn it into electrical information, and they communicate it to the brain, which then decodes it into digital holographic information. And that's the world we experience as out